The texts behind me on this bookshelf aren't comprehensive. They're relational. These are books that inspire me and teach me how to think, how to meditate, how to pray, how to dialogue and debate. Each of them is something that I relate to, and today I wanted to give you a glimpse into a few of these to demonstrate really what is on the rabbi's bookshelf. So if you look behind me, these are many of the Hebrew and Aramaic texts that I use regularly. On this side, we have more Hasidic mysticism and Kabbalah. Over here, we have Torah commentaries and Torah from the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And here we have a few sets of Talmud. To start off, I want to demonstrate a little something that is special in this type of text from the Torah world. So this is called Torah Chaim. It's an edition of Hebrew verses from the Hebrew Bible with commentary all around. And if you look inside, it gives a demonstration of some of the most important elements and virtues that are presented in Jewish Torah study, both in the mystical tradition and the, you could call it ordinary tradition or simply straight Torah-based study tradition. We have here is the text of the Hebrew Bible itself. Over here, we have a very old Aramaic translation, but what really stands out for me as a teacher and in my own value system is these are many different commentators on the same passage. We have hundreds of years of commentary represented here from rabbis who largely only knew each other from their writings. So for any given word, phrase, verse, we're going to have several different views and opinions. And sometimes these opinions agree with each other, and sometimes they don't. There are certain rabbis and teachers that really pride themselves on being harmonizers, people who can understand the unity from different voices. And there are other teachers, like one of my favorites, Nachmanides, who is also known as the Ramban. And he was someone who seemed to enjoy to name the positions of other rabbis who preceded him and then to argue with them. He was more in, you could say, almost the rap battle genre than the harmonizing genre in Torah study. He happened to be a Kabbalist as well, and so his commentaries are really the first notable example of someone weaving in the Kabbalistic secrets within the explanations. The real message that comes through when I look at a page like that is it's okay to disagree. Not only is it okay, it's sacred. There's something really beautiful and valuable about that. And so it turns out there's not really one way to view a verse. And if life is like a sacred text as well, we can take this principle and extrapolate it just a little bit to say there are many different perspectives on the same moment, the same phenomenon. It's important to remain true and to come at these understandings in good faith. But there's more than one way to understand any phenomenon in our world. Another set of discourses that really present this form of argumentation, but in another way, is from the Talmud. These are 3 of the 37 books of the Talmud. It's a massive text. And if the Hebrew Bible, starting with the Torah, is really what is the foundation of the lineage, then the Babylonian Talmud is what extrapolates it and forms so much of its essence. That the project that began almost 2,000 years ago as the temple was destroyed in ancient Israel, and there was a need to reimagine for a new era. So in a book such as this is Chagiga, And this is a book that is known for, among other things, containing a lot of mystical stories and also really interesting stories about a rabbi who seemed to be almost the modern day equivalent of an atheist, someone who said, I don't think God rewards and punishes. And so even though he was really learned, he stopped keeping a lot of the laws. So this book is, as you'll see on every page, we have in the main text itself, this interior section is the original discussions of these sages going between the 2nd century and the 6th century of the Common Era. And around them, again, the inside margin here, we have a medieval rabbi named Rashi. On the outside margin, we have a school founded by his grandchildren. But if you look at the very most ancient rabbis cited here and some of the more recent commentaries that are added, we have more than 1,000 years represented on a single page. Again, there's a lot of disagreement and discussion. There's a blend of rituals, customs, laws, and stories, but it's all in service of seeking wisdom and trying to discover, really, at the end of the day, what's the best way we can all live. The Talmud project inspires me because it is something that was done not in a mainstream way initially, but which grew and succeeded over time. It was people who had knowledge of past traditions and texts, but they were also very much connecting into the present day and the needs as well. The physical temple was destroyed. And so one of the things that the Talmud creates over many generations of thoughtful commentaries and reflections and innovations was they created a way to have a temple that was in time, a temple that could travel with people wherever they went. And in essence, though they might not have been fully conscious of what they were doing at the beginning, the rabbis, which started as a very small group, created something which today we essentially know as Judaism because it allowed people to find meaning that connected in with what came before, but was innovated and relevant in a new way. The Talmud, in that way, gives us a model for religious innovation, which is it's wonderful to be connected to right now and to know what the needs are for today. But if we want to create change that doesn't just last a single generation, but might last 10 generations or 20 generations or more, the way that that's done, certainly in the Jewish world, is we blend our new ideas, our new perspectives with the ancient traditions that precede us. And in that way, we weave them together. So today we can learn innovations, if you will, from the Talmud, but it feels like we're studying Torah because they're spoken of using the symbolism, the myths, the references of the tradition. That's a model that is followed to this day and has been followed in many other eras of people who had new ideas. They found new needs in their time, but they wanted to weave it in with more ancient forms in order to, in a sense, hide the innovations as traditions, but in another way, create change that lasts more than just a generation or two and can carry on forward for hundreds or thousands of years to come. So those are more, let's say, standard elements of a traditional Beit Midrash or a traditional house of study. Talmud itself, I find particularly difficult. It's a challenge. It hurts the head in a sense of like working out. It's a brain exercise. I remember when I studied higher levels of chemistry in high school, feeling like a similar sense of, wow, that's really, really challenging. I could do it, but it feels like a workout. So Talmud is the kind of study that often feels that way. Another era, another expression, which is not as common in every house of study, but which is a particular focus of mine. Over here, we see the world of the Hasidic masters. So if the Talmud is finished in the 6th century CE, Hasidut or Hasidism, a form of Jewish mysticism, really surfaces in this school, starting with the Baal Shem Tov in the early 18th century, and it carries on until today. So some of these books that are the most meaningful for me, over here we have the Me'or Einayim. It's a title which means the illumination of the eyes. And it was written as recorded sermons from a teacher from Chernobyl, Ukraine, also known as the Chernobyl Rebbe. He was Menachem Twersky of Chernobyl, and he is, to me, a kind of early psychologist who's blending spirituality with depth psychology, understanding the subconscious, but he articulates it all through this very symbolic view of the Torah. So in the same way we had over here, all of these medieval commentators trying to understand what were these characters in the Bible really up to, here we have a Hasidic mystic saying, what does this really symbolize about our world? So the very first word in the Torah, as an example, is Breshit. In English, that means in the beginning. And what the Meor Einayim does is he says, yes, that means in the beginning, but it could also mean through the beginning, if we translate it in a certain way. And the beginning is a code word for divine wisdom. He cites some sources to back up his case. What he ends up communicating is that the light of God actually isn't just found in scriptures or scrolls. The light of God, because our world was created with this divine wisdom, it's found everywhere in our world. And he talks about what it means for divine light to condense and to darken as our world comes into being, and how it's difficult to find the light in the darkness, but that is also where the greatest, brightest, most luminous light is stored. So the Meor Einayim from Menachem Twersky of Chernobyl is a beautiful classic of early Hasidism, and it accompanies the weekly readings of the Torah so that you can get a deep glimpse of some of that pre-Freud psychological, mystical interpretation. Another of my favorite texts is the Noam Elimelech. He was a teacher who lived around the same time as the Meor Einayim, and the Noam Elimelech was someone who really believed deeply in training spiritual leaders. So his text, which is also according to the cycle of the Torah readings every week, the Parshiot, his text is aimed at mentorship for spiritual leaders. He used the term tzaddik, and tzaddik can mean different things depending on who says it, but for the Noam Elimelech, who was Elimelech of Lezhensk was his name, a tzaddik is a mystical leader. It's someone who both has an inner spiritual life, but is also in service of others. Because he was training real people, not just imaginary figures who were supposed to be perfect or what have you, he actually understood that it's not easy to be a tzaddik, to be in that role. And he talked about different states that you can reach in that capacity, but it's okay to be flawed and still be a tzaddik and still be a leader. So he says the most advanced form, this is one of his teachings, is when you can actually put aside your own spiritual development for the sake of the needs of the community. You're not trying to take credit. You are humble to a degree that you're much more concerned with the well-being of the people you're serving than a sense of self-development. And he says self-development's great. And there are people also who might not be quite at that level of humility, who are working on themselves, and they need to, and maybe they'll stumble sometimes, and that's okay. They can still be in that role. So it's a very practical guide based in that style of symbolic interpretation, but a very beautiful articulation of a path of spiritual leadership that is relevant to this day. So there's a few other Hasidic masters that I currently have up on my bookshelf. There are so many more. Sometimes I go on Sefaria or I find online resources as well, but these ones are here, and books that I've spent a lot of time with as physical books, because these are, in a sense, heroes of mine that I've met from past eras that have helped me become who I am in my own learning journey in my life as well. One of the things, again, that they all emphasize in various ways is, how do we discern truth from multiplicity? How can we find our own truth, but how can we also discover what others are saying that we may or may not disagree with? How do we disagree in a healthy way? How can we learn, and how can we find the difference between what's on the surface and what's really going on underneath? An earlier generation of mystics and scholars who looked at this were Kabbalists. And here is one such Kabbalist. This is Joseph Gicatilia, who lived in the 13th century in Spain. And these are a few of his books contained in this one section. And the one that I spent the most time with, Sha'arei Ora, means gates of life, gates of light, rather. Joseph Gicatilia lived before the Zohar, the great magnum opus of medieval Kabbalah. And he wrote 10-chapter book on all 10 of the Sefirot. And in it, he takes it chapter by chapter. He calls them gates, gate by gate. And he says, so this first gate, Shekhinah, also called Malchut, has many different divine names. And he goes through many of the main divine names associated with each one. And in so doing, lays out the symbolic language of Kabbalah, which is going to be elaborated upon for many, many generations after. So Sha'arei Ora, Gates of Light, is like an index or a glossary for Kabbalah. These books are the ones I keep behind me, but I usually don't show this. If you look up with this camera, you would find and discover that here is a complete set of the English translation of the Zohar from Daniel Matt. I often study Zohar in the original Aramaic with Hebrew translation, but I use Daniel Matt's commentary because he really is able to, and this came out just in the last couple of decades, this project was completed and worked on for something like 20 years. Daniel Matt is a professor who lives in California, and he has a very good ability to capture the evocative language of the Zohar without diluting it, but he also brings commentaries to try and illuminate not what we can interpret of the Zohar today, but also what were they trying to get across at the beginning. So I find that a very, very helpful translation. So these are a few of my favorite books. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. I'm happy to go into detail on more particular elements, but sometimes people ask me, what are these books behind you? What are you standing in front of? And there is a relationship that forms with each of them. I have spent time, many hours with these books, and there's something akin to friendship or almost a sense that you can get of celebrity. Wow, this famous ancient teacher is wise or deep or learned. And there's a sense of awe that I have when I open up different books. And it gives me both the lessons itself and also a really deep reverence for some of the great ancestors that we have in our tradition that, at the very least, can help orient us and help us figure out who we are in this life. Am I going to be as prolific as some of these teachers? Probably not. Am I going to have the memorizing capacity for all of these texts like so many of them had, this photographic memory? I don't know if that's exactly my path, but there are some of them here, like the Kedushat Levi, who was speaking to the people. He was trying to take very refined esoteric wisdom and communicate it into a way that can be accessible. I might be more like him. I might be more like Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev in that sense, and maybe with a little bit of Elimelech of Lezhensk training other teachers, but they show us not only the unity of a wisdom tradition, but also the beautiful diversity and how, at the end of the day, as scholars, as mystics, as practitioners of the path of life, it's a combination of finding what's true and what's universal and also figuring out who we are in that and to be ourselves, our imperfect selves, to be imperfect vessels for the light and to find our ways to be of service and of help, to enjoy ourselves along the way as we travel. So many blessings to each of you as you find your own bookshelves and your own meaning through the great storehouse of knowledge that has preceded us. And may we add our wisdom and may our best insights find their ways into the bookshelves of our descendants as well. If learning about my bookshelf was meaningful for you, and you'd like to learn more about how these texts and traditions are woven together, I offer a streamable online course called Introduction to Jewish Mysticism. It's a grounded, practical, text-based, and experiential approach to the foundations of Kabbalah, Hasidut, and beyond. The link to check out the first lecture for free and to register is in the description.